Good evening. This is the Pass Ball Show brought to you by Pielli.com, November the 20th. It's Monday. Happy to be with you for the next hour up until about 10 o'clock today. Pass Ball Show will be with you tomorrow and Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll be back with you Friday and Saturday at the same time. This is a show where we talk about baseball and its history. We talk about controversial sports topics, and we also talk about unifying America. So we're going to get into that stuff in a little bit. Wanted to talk a little bit to start the show about a couple players, a pro football player and a women's tennis player that passed away over the course of the day. They kind of take me back to my youth during the 1990s. And we'll start out by talking about the tragic auto accident which took the life of longtime NFL wide receiver Terry Glenn. And Terry had the opportunity to go to Ohio State University and then played several seasons in the NFL, most notably with the New England Patriots, and then finished his career with the Dallas Cowboys, a guy that certainly, did a very good job. Had a couple seasons where he caught 90 balls, 72, 70. So he was a number one wide receiver for several seasons with New England first, and then with the Dallas Cowboys. And a guy that was known, very much for the success that he had as a number one wide receiver. Passes away at the sad age of 43 in a car accident. And, like I said, a guy that went to Ohio State, had several good years in the NFL. It's sad to see him go at such a young age. Another, former tennis player, Jana Novotna, who was a Wimbledon champion in 1998, and then also made it to the finals in 1993, was also known as a very good doubles player over the course of several years in the women's tennis circuit. Passes away after a battle with cancer at the age of 49. So we'll start off with that. Rest in peace to Terry Glenn and Jana Novotna. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple things that I wanted to bring up in regards to our biasness and reasons that we tend to not look to each other to strengthen ourselves and unify ourselves as a country. I will get into that in a little bit. I do want to talk about Pielli's picks, which have been an absolute embarrassment. And I want to give you a little bit of advice. If you want some good picks on games, whether in the NFL or during the course of the baseball season, I'm going to be picking some baseball games. We'll throw some basketball picks in there. If you want to know who's going to win, pick against me, because that's basically the pace that I've started. As we got the game tonight where I'm taking the Falcons in Seattle against the Seattle Seahawks. And so far, I'm 1-3 in my picks for this week. The only pick that I got right was because of the spread. I took the Redskins against the New Orleans Saints, which looked very good for a while until the Redskins absolutely collapsed and the Saints won a close game, but still didn't cover the spread, so I technically got that one right. But I was wrong on the Raiders against the Patriots. I was wrong taking the Cowboys against the Eagles, and I was wrong taking the Los Angeles Rams against the Minnesota Vikings. So basically what I've shown so far is that I have no idea what I'm talking about in regards to picking games, which at least I can admit. So once again, next time I do Pielli's picks, you want to throw some money in there, pick against the ones that I picked, because obviously I can't pick a game to save my life. But other stuff to get into, I obviously got the Monday night game going on right now. You got the Seattle Seahawks at home against the Atlanta Falcons. So once again, if you're going to pick the game right, I would suggest pick against me. And I picked Atlanta to win this game. So obviously I have the 7.5 points going for me. So if Seattle can somehow manage to win the game by 7 or less, I will have picked up the win there. But obviously, my picks could not be any worse this year, especially in regards to the National Football League. So I did want to get into talking about basically what I've been talking about the whole time, is the fact that people in regards to the United States of America, our lovely citizens, seem to all have it wrong in regards to using our first opinions and then using it the way that we've treated each other. And the bottom line is the division that exists in this country is something that really goes back to the days of the late 60s and the days where you had the race wars and stuff going on back then. And, you know, if you look at the state of this country and how we're treating our own people, it probably was only topped by that in history. Really, prior to that, it hadn't really happened at all. And obviously, we can give credit to the United States of America for how far we've come in that time. And obviously, the resurgence of starting to treat each other as equals took a big, role towards the positive in the 1960s and led to what seemed to be a rough time, but it came moving the country in the right direction. And as we've gotten to the times that we are in right now, we've seen the relations between ourselves, and it's not strictly race. It's basically the way that we're treating each other. And the problem is that everybody who has decided to take a side, whether it's liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat, you're really only looking at it from one end of the spectrum, and you're alienating 50 million people who don't want to hear you because you've taken a certain side. And, the United States of America was set to be, this greatest democracy, and setting up all these different types of people who have come in from all different angles and all other different regions with all different beliefs, ended up coming together to become America. And to use a stupid deli reference, American cheese is a mixture of all other different cheeses. So the United States of America really means a whole mixture of the best of what the world can bring into one country. But the problem is that everybody is categorized, and they've categorized themselves into groups. And these groups are separating themselves from each other, it's unfortunate. We understand that it's going to happen a little bit, but it has caused the divide that we have in this country. And when you feel a certain way about something, you should have the right to express your opinion. And now, if you throw an opinion that isn't on par with that of one of these so-called groups, you get ostracized. You get, basically put down because your opinion isn't on par with the rest of this so-called group. So my question is, why have we gotten to that point where the simple fact that somebody may not agree with your hardcore opinion, all of a sudden they have to be treated as if they're doing something wrong? So if the United States of America was put together to be a huge group, a unification of all different types of people, wouldn't you think that all different types of people have all types of different views? It's unfortunate. And one of the things that I wanted to get into is to talk about how in a world of quote-unquote fake news, it gets thrown out there as being such a big deal now. And, every time somebody hears something that they don't agree with, they throw the quote fake news in at it. So if we got into a point in society where a fact is not a fact anymore, a fact, even though it could be proven by statements or proven by other things that have happened, and at one point, a fact really was a fact. A fact is just a fact in one's opinion. Because if somebody doesn't agree with that fact, all of a sudden it's not a fact anymore, and it's an opinion. And the same really can hold true to any single statement you make, especially along the lines of politics. You used to be able to sway yourself or go towards one side in regards to your political beliefs based off of your interest in certain issues. And now you're essentially choosing to take a side. And like I said before, I'm looking at 4 major terrorist groups that exist in this world. You have Al-Qaeda, you have ISIS, and you have the Republicans and the Democrats here in the United States of America. And that's really where it's coming to. Yeah, the division that exists and people that decide to stand up on their soapbox and talk about how they could do no wrong because they've chosen this side. I think we all need to look in the mirror and start to realize the cults that individually we have joined. And hopefully we can get to a point in this country where people start to stay away from partisan politics and decide to unify in a group that's going to be for everybody. Because within your own little political cult that you've decided to join, you're not about the unification of everybody. Within your own people, you feel like you are. And you feel like the evil exists on the other side. And now I think it's time at some point we all look in the mirror and realize that we are all part of the problem. And as long as we sit here and go with our pom-poms up in the air talking about how great it is to be on one side of the political spectrum, we can start talking about the other people that we're alienated by being the way that we are. So hopefully at some point, we can all grow to form this third group, which should be all about unifying the people that exist in this country. Because that's what we need. And I've said all along, and I'll continue to say it every day on this show until the day that I die, the divide in this country is only strengthening our enemies. And it's only strengthening the terrorist groups that exist that want to kill every single one of us. And it doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what our differences are. It doesn't matter what we think in regards to being better than other people in our own country. Once again, John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. Happy to be with you on Monday, the 20th day of November 2017. We're going to talk a little bit about some stuff going on in the world of baseball, but I do want to finish this little point that I'm making here in regards to the state of this country where we're at right now. All you have to do is mention the name of our president, and you have to be on one side or the other. We've gotten to a point where we can't announce the fact that this man is our president without having to declare whether we either are in love with him and support him in everything he says or does, or we hate him and we will vilify him in every respect and every possible chance that we can. And it's, the bottom line, it's, obviously he's part of the problem, but we're all part of the problem too. And maybe at one point we'll stand up and Talk about ways that we could unify each other instead of saying we have to be on one side or the other. So now that I came through with that, I think it's kind of hard to digress and talk about the world of sports, which I'll try to do. And I thought the best segue would be to talk about a couple athletes that ended up passing away at young ages today. Obviously, Terry Glenn, a longtime receiver from Ohio State with the Patriots and the Cowboys, and Jana Novotna, the Wimbledon champion on the women's tour. Two players that I remember from my youth, in the 90s, and in Terry Glenn's case, the early part of 2000s. And I think it's, I think it's just hard when we're talking about, our own times that we got on this earth, because at some point, we're all going to move on, and we're all going to be just a memory. And, I try to think of what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered first for for my support and my acceptance of God and the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, number one. But then also I'd like to be remembered in regards to my family, my loved ones, all that are around me, to just, remember that I had a decent heart and I cared a little bit. But then I start to think of other things that I want to be remembered for. I think of my baseball knowledge, being a historian, knowing everything from the inception of baseball to the 1800s to what it is now, everything that has happened in between, to all the World Series champions, and being able to name any particular year and start to, run off facts about things that happened in that particular season. That's good. I also want to be remembered for the personality that I got in regards to talking about controversial sports topics. I've spoken about LeVar Ball. And once again, my opinion about LeVar Ball is, who the hell is LeVar Ball? Some dude that is trying to live his own life precipitously through his sons because he couldn't accomplish anything by himself. We talk about other controversial sports topics, and I could jump in and, I want to be known for my opinion there. But most importantly, outside of God and outside my family, I want to continue to reiterate these points that I want to make in regards to this country that we live in. Because we have a great opportunity. Every last one of us does, to make a difference. And we can make a difference by just simply talking to one another, respecting one another, and at some point, just understanding that there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to agree with you, no matter what it is that you say, no matter what it is that you talk about. And you hope that at some point we can respect and understand that. And the only way to respect and understand somebody else that doesn't believe the same things that you do or has different opinions. Remember before I was talking about a fact has essentially become an opinion. The only way to do that is by talking to one another and asking each other questions. But we've decided as a whole to alienate ourselves from anybody that has any different ideologies or has any philosophical or sociological differences. We've decided that if somebody isn't agreeing with exactly what it is that we're saying, the exact way that we're saying it and putting it, then we don't want to associate with that person. Since when did God create a carbon copy or a cookie cutter set of making every single person the same? It sounds like a simple statement, but all you have to do is just turn on the news or listen to people in a casual conversation to think that in most people's minds, everybody is supposed to be the same. I don't know. I think at some point where we had the opportunity to figure it out. And like I quoted the great Art Williams a couple shows ago, talking about how as a football coach, he had these great plays. And when he was designing these plays, there was no way that these plays could possibly screw up. They're flawless. The way they're set up, they're going to be successful 100% of the time. But the only person that can screw it up is you. And that's really how God created his own people. He created millions and millions of his own children, gave them all the resources to live the perfect life. But the only people that can screw it up are the people that he created. And that's what we're doing right now. We have this country that's set with people that can't wait to stand on their own soapboxes and talk politics and how their political cult that they've joined knows everything and nobody else knows anything. The only person screwing it up is you. And when I say you, I mean you plural, including myself. So once again, as I finish this part of the program, what should we do from here? Should we continue to stand on our soapbox in our own political cult and say that anybody that doesn't agree with everything that I feel in the same way that I'm saying it, the same way that I'm feeling it, is wrong? Or are we going to start to open our minds up a little bit, talk to each other, ask questions, and say as a group, not our own little individual groups, but a group as a whole, what can we all do to love each other a little more, care about each other a little more? Because once again, this is a nation that was never set by a carbon copy. This was a nation that was never set by a cookie cutter. It's a mixture of all different people from all different parts of the world, from all different nationalities, from all different races, from all different religions. Yet you go to other countries and great nations throughout the world. What do you have? For the most part, you have similarities. The same kind of people with the same kind of race, the same kind of religion. And we're all supposed to be the same. So how did we forget that this nation that we have right here in the United States of America was created by its differences, was created to be the melting pot amongst all different people? Once again, John Pielli here with you. Once again, we'll be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7, Wednesday, 6 to 7, same time on Friday and Saturday as we, hopefully, people have something better to do than to listen to me talk on Thanksgiving Day. Happy you're here with me. Got talking about things going on in the world of sports. In a couple weeks, I'll be heading down to Florida, to Orlando for baseball's winter meetings. A lot of the action will start kicking up. You can pick whatever it is that your favorite baseball team is, and I'm sure that they have some sort of plan. As this is the time usually where all the executives from all the different teams get together. They discuss things with themselves, but they also discuss things with each other and start putting together the landscape of what the teams are going to look like for what will be right now the 2018 season. I'm trying to think of things that stood out to me in regards to this weekend in football. We can talk a little Giants football if you want, but Obviously, you're talking about a team that is going to be in transition, trying to figure out what it's going to look like next year, what's going to come back, what different needs do they have to address, starting out 1-8, and of course winning yesterday against the Kansas City Chiefs. But, it kind of made me think about the team on the other side of the field. And the Kansas City Chiefs obviously got off to a really good start. They're set to make it into the playoffs this year. They still have a 2-game lead in their division, which, in spite of the way that they've played, still stands. They've been lucky because the Denver Broncos have been bad. The Oakland Raiders have been even worse. And the now Los Angeles Chargers got off to such a bad start that their season kind of ended before it started. So you're trying to think, where do the Chiefs go from here? Because if you polled any of the NFL experts that, couldn't wait to throw their opinions out there, if they were asked what team had the best opportunity to challenge the New England Patriots, they all would have said the Kansas City Chiefs. But if you watch the Chiefs play over the last several weeks, pretty much culminating with what you saw yesterday, this was a team that was unable to move the ball whatsoever. Their quarterback, Alex Smith, not only does he look different, but he looks like he's playing scared. A guy that's known for not making mistakes was making mistakes. And it just seemed like the Chiefs, as a team from top to bottom, couldn't seem to really get anything going. So does that mean that it's an easy path for the New England Patriots? Does it mean that the Pats pretty much have a run through the AFC and a place in this year's Super Bowl? You'd figure at some point there's going to be a team in that conference that's going to challenge them. Is it the Pittsburgh Steelers? All you heard at the beginning of the season is how Ben Roethlisberger wanted to retire. But you have a well-coached team there, a team that always seems to go under the radar, never gets the accolades in regards to being a team that could challenge for the league title until the second half of the season, when you're like, all of a sudden you look back at their record and you realize that they don't lose very much and they're on pace to win their division again. But nobody seems to give the Pittsburgh Steelers any credit. Obviously, they're playing in the shadows, and they have played in the shadows for a while, of the New England Patriots. And the Patriots seem to go out there year after year and have success and dominate and put themselves in a position where they're either in the AFC Championship game or they're either in or winning the Super Bowl. So obviously they deserve all the credit that they get. The Steelers seem to, year in and year out, put themselves in a position where they are a win or two away. And the question is, this year, are they strong enough to be able to win a game in Foxborough? And it's hard to say that that's really a possibility right now, but the Steelers have been playing better. Obviously, the Patriots have been playing great since they lost a couple games in the first couple weeks of the season. And I guess from the casual football fan, they look at the American Football Conference and say, hey, it's kind of boring. Patriots, Steelers, a little bit of Denver. Outside of that, who is really emerging in that conference to have the opportunity to not only get to a Super Bowl, but potentially win it? So you're really talking about 13 teams that don't really have much of a chance. But yet you get these sleeper pickers, the football experts, that always try to anoint this team or a team that they've chosen here and there that's going to make a run and try to potentially take out the New England Patriots. It was the Raiders. Think about all those years that everybody was talking about the Houston Texans. And it's a shame what happened to them this year with Deshaun Watson getting hurt. I think they could have given a good battle. Watson was playing at a tremendous level, then I would have liked to see how he would have been able to compete in a playoff game. They got a good defense. This is a team that really, since they came into the league, everybody's been saying, hey, Houston Texans, they're going to be the ones to make a run this year. And they pretty much, laughed at you every time you said it. So there's the Chiefs. There's, the Raiders over the last couple of years. But you're really seeing some, all in all, in spite of some good moments, some garbage football played in the AFC. The Broncos, who can't seem to get anything together, their quarterback play has been atrocious. They've been known for having a good defense, but they've obviously taken a big step back. So that just leaves the Patriots and the Steelers. Which, if you think about the other conference, the National Football Conference, it couldn't be it pretty much is the exact opposite. How many different years, as we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show? Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. Happy to be with you on Monday, the 20th of November. The NFC is essentially bringing a different team into the Super Bowl every year. Whether it was Atlanta or Carolina or Green Bay. So now you start to think of what different team will represent that conference in the Super Bowl this year. If you want to go through, probability and, go year by year by year and try to see if there's some sort of trend set up, well, I think odds are you're going to see a different team represent the NFC that we've seen in recent years. And, of course, the Seahawks won that Super Bowl a couple of years ago, lost the next year. But outside of that, you seldomly see the same team. It seems to be a different team every year coming out of that conference. So my guess is it's going to be one of the teams that we haven't seen in the Super Bowl in a while. Is it going to be Philadelphia? Is it going to be Los Angeles? How about New Orleans? I know they won a Super Bowl, within this decade. But it seems to be some sort of weird rotation that's involving a lot of different teams in that conference. And I'd be happy to be an NFC team because I would at least know that there's a chance that things could come together and my team could dominate that year. And it's funny because these same NFL experts that seem to be able to tell you everything, even though they don't know everything, or all of a sudden jumping on the bandwagons of the teams that happen to have a good record this year. What happened to everybody that was on the Atlanta bandwagon last year? Everybody that said that the Falcons were so dominant, the adjustments they made to their defense, how they had the best players in the sport, and there was no way that they were not starting their dynasty. To me, their dynasty was knocked down quite a bit the way they lost the Super Bowl last year. It was almost unfathomable how they blew that lead. Almost to a point where their lead was so big that they almost couldn't lose it if they tried. But in spite of that, these NFL experts, and the same thing applies to baseball, the same thing applies to basketball, even though basketball is more of a momentum sport and more of a top-heavy sport. If you look at where the Golden State Warriors are, it's hard to not pick against them year in and year out over the last 3, now going into 4 years. People have been so quick to try to talk about the demise of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Well, they're about to win their 5th straight today, beating a Detroit Piston team, which had the 2nd best record in the conference. But the problem is that, we never use our creative minds in regards to trying to think out of the box a little bit in regards to a team that could emerge. We use this word or this term sleepers when we're trying to pick a team that we think can exceed expectations. But we've only named it or termed it sleepers because they're not on, that major float and that parade ride and that bandwagon because they didn't win anything the year before. And I can't wait to see in baseball all the people are going to pick the Houston Astros to win the World Series again for no other reason than the fact that they won the World Series last year. The New England Patriots are probably the closest thing in professional sports to the Golden State Warriors because just year in and year out, they continue to dominate. And if they lose in a conference championship game, they still lose with a 13-3 or 14-2 regular season record. It's really the model of consistency that we haven't seen that much in professional sports. The consistency that the Patriots have put together really rivals few other than the Yankee dynasties that we saw in the late 30s. Yankees won their 4 straight World Series from 36 to 39, and then their 5 straight from 49 to 53. And in that ridiculous run that they had from the years of 47 to 64, where they only had a handful of World Series that they weren't part of. And remember, there was no playoffs then. They had to have the best record in their league to get to the World Series. And they managed to do that just about year after year. So it's going to be impossible to talk about any other run by a particular team in sports that's going to rival those Yankees teams. So if you say the Patriots run over the last, 18 years could be second place, it's second place by a mile. And you know what? You still have to consider those Boston Celtic teams when they were winning year after year. With Bill Walton essentially winning a championship every single year he was playing. So think about it a little more, and maybe the Patriots are a distant third, but still pretty impressive what they've done. But going back to the point that I'm making, every time a team either wins a championship in sports or plays for a championship and loses, all of a sudden they get anointed to be the favorites the next year. And I understand if you're playing a game of odds would favor a team that was just there. But when you go back to history, for the rare exceptions of teams that were dynasties like the ones that I just mentioned, it never seems to work that way. So we still keep playing the odds instead of perhaps going with a team that didn't make it to the championship or win the championship last year. I mean, is anybody outside of the Philadelphia Eagles fans that every single year when the season starts they think they're going to win the Super Bowl? Anybody outside of them had the Eagles at 9-1 right now? How about anybody from the outside of the people in the outskirts of Louisiana? Pick the New Orleans Saints to be doing as well as they did or have done to this point. The issue with them is, the majority of these quote-unquote experts had them as completely done. They were talking about what team Sean Payton, their coach, was going to be coaching next year because he was supposed to be gone. But that's the thing that makes sports great. And that's why that, for the majority of us that, and I would assume most people that are listening to the show are sports fans of some sorts. But that's the reason why we enjoy sports, because of the unexpected and how it very seldom works out the way that we predict that it will. Yet we need to hear experts in particular sports rant and rave about what they think we're going to see over the course of the season. And when you hear them talking, they're speaking in a tongue where you would think that they might as well just cancel the season because their predictions are going to be so correct. And sometimes your picks for a particular season, let alone an individual game, are just a flip of a coin. If you want to go out to the NFC before the season started, you could have had a little wheel spinning with all 16 teams and picked whatever team the wheel stopped on. And outside of, let's say, 2 or 3 teams in the conference which have performed absolutely horrible, that team would have had a pretty good chance of making the playoffs. Or what if you landed on a Philadelphia or a New Orleans or a Los Angeles Rams? That's another team that, I didn't hear anybody talking about how good they were going to be. But yet we never hear these same experts talk about how wrong they were. I spent the beginning of this show talking about how wrong I was with all 4 of the picks that I've made so far, only winning one of them because of the point spread. I picked the Redskins to beat the Saints. I won that prediction because of the point spread, because the Saints didn't cover. The other ones I was wrong about. But I guess we don't think that that's good television or good radio for somebody to admit that they're a human being and admit that predicting sports is the furthest thing from an exact science. The fact that it's just a guess. It's an educated guess. That's all it is. It's an educated guess from an individual game, and is way less than an educated guess when you're talking about who's going to win the whole thing. And I know when you're making predictions, you can't factor in injuries. If you were big on Green Bay coming into this year, you couldn't have predicted that Aaron Rodgers was going to get hurt. And if you look at all the different players, significant, impactful players in the NFL this season, there's been way more injuries this year than we've ever seen. Not only injuries in general, but injuries to key players, top quarterbacks, top defensive players. And it's every year, every week, we hear this player's going on injured reserve. That player's going on injured reserve. Their season's over. So you're going to get to a point where you're wondering how many players that started the season in a starting lineup for an NFL team are even going to be left. So you throw in all the injuries, making an unexact science even more unexact. And then the safe route always becomes just jumping on the bandwagon. Who's winning right now? Because I'm going to talk about how great they are, how great they were, and how great they're always going to be. I don't know, man. Once again, John Pielli, Pass Ball Show, here with you. Talk a little bit of baseball right now. We spoke a couple days ago. We were talking about J.D. Martinez and Eric Hosmer, 2 of the top free agents They're going to be certainly going to, get $100+ million contracts. The agreement or lack of agreement between Major League Baseball and the Japanese league could potentially delay the eventual posting of the pitcher Ohtani. And this is a guy that obviously has been one of the more highly touted players to come out of the Japanese league in years, is only 23 years old. And not only that, is a great pitcher, but also can hit. And he's going to become something that we haven't seen in baseball in a long time. That's that two-way player. Now, they're calling him over in Japan, the Japanese Babe Ruth. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold over, and maybe offensively, he may not be as good as he was over there. So my question with that, you have a player that can pitch, can throw almost 100 miles an hour, can dominate a baseball game as a starting pitcher, and you have the same player that could also potentially hit 30 home runs. Game of baseball has changed, as we've seen before our own eyes. Pitchers being babied, taken out of games as early as possible to preserve their arms. So is there a team actually out there in baseball that's willing to let this player pitch and hit? If that's the case, it'll be pretty fascinating. And if that's also the case, I wouldn't even care who signed him. Whoever would want to bring this player in, I just want to see him pitch and hit. And if it's in the American League, pitch, DH the other 4 games, and then pitch again. In the National League, maybe it's pitch, be a pure bat off the bench, maybe learn to play a little outfield or first base. I'd like to see it, because that's the throwback player that the game really should see. The game, the type of player that almost wouldn't be allowed in Major League Baseball. If Babe Ruth came up today, we might not see his true talent. And it's a shame, because the way the game is being told it has to be played, and a lot of it has to do with behind the computer, with our analytic stats and our tendencies and our spray charts, and the numbers that say that a pitcher can't face a batting order the 3rd time around. We tend to forget about its history. Its history has gotten us to the point that we're at now. I understand that baseball, the way it was played in the 1870s and 1880s, is much different from the game played from the early 1900s to 1920, and then again from 1920 to 1947, and then again from 1947 to 1968, and then again from 1968 to 1980. And then, of course, the time from 1980 to about 2003. And those are all notably different eras in baseball for different reasons. And you could say from 2003-ish, maybe 2005 to now is a different era of baseball. And you can even say maybe from 2012 or 2010 to now is the accentuation of the analytic stats. And it's funny to say that you could take a player that played, let's say, from 1900 to 1920, and say that a player that's playing now would not have lasted then. And that is probably just as equal of a statement as saying that that player that played then may not last now. Because you'd have to factor in both things. Factor in the way the game is played right now and go back and say, all right, the way the game was played then would have to be played by the rules then, would have to be played with players being used the same way that they were used then. So you're taking players that are playing now and essentially transporting them back to a different game. So Shohei Ohtani, if he was playing in 1920, would absolutely have the chance to pitch and play the field. And if he was that good of a hitter, he could have become the next Babe Ruth. But if you take Babe Ruth and put him in a game right now that we see right now, with pitchers only going 6 innings and not being allowed to throw 100 pitches and not being allowed to face a batting order the third time through, I'd ask if Babe Ruth would have more than a 6 to 7 year career now. Because I don't think anybody would have thought enough outside the box to say, hey, let this guy hit a little bit. Try him in right field and see if he could continue to hit as well as he did last year when he was a pitcher. Thanks for everybody for tuning into the show today. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m. right here on Periscope and Facebook Live. And if you missed the broadcast, we'll pop you onto YouTube so you can listen to it really any way, shape, or form you want. So as always, God bless you, and I'll see you on the other side.